Starting today, we'll talk about a new book released on March 18, 2025, called Abundance. This book has no subtitle, and its English title is just one word: abundance. You might recall another popular book from several years ago with the same title, Abundance, written by Peter Diamandis and Stephen Kotler. We've mentioned that book several times on this channel. The previous Abundance discussed how technological advancements would lead us to a society of material abundance. This new abundance can be said to focus on the means to achieve that abundant society. The authors of this book are Ezra Klein, a columnist for the New York Times, and Derek Thompson, a staff writer for The Atlantic. We've often mentioned Derek Thompson before, and we've even discussed his previous book, Hitmakers. The antonym of abundance is scarcity. Simply relying on technology to eliminate scarcity and welcome abundance is not enough. You also need economics and politics. As is well known, the core issue of economics is addressing scarcity, and correct economic policies require correct politics. The United States is a very wealthy country, but it is currently facing severe scarcity. High housing prices, insufficient clean energy supply, aging infrastructure, and expensive healthcare and education, among other things. The authors believe these shortages are not because the United States lacks technology or resources, but because they are artificially created. In simple terms, both political parties in the U.S. have significant problems. The theme of this book is how to solve these issues and build an abundant society. I believe this book is very meaningful for everyone. Recently, Trump started a trade war, and there's an interesting saying. The U.S. wants to become a manufacturing country, while China wants to become a consumer country. Both countries want to become the opposite of what they are. China and the U.S. are so different. Understanding the U.S. can inspire you to think about how to make China abundant. Diamandis and Kotler's follow-up book to Abundance is The Future is Faster Than You Think, which we've also discussed in our series. Klein and Thompson at the beginning of this new book describe a future scenario exactly like the one in that book. By 2050, you should be able to live the following life. Energy prices will be incredibly cheap and have zero carbon footprint. Water will come from seawater desalination aided by microbial membranes. This method is so efficient that it provides over half of the fresh water, and we no longer need to rely on natural rivers. There will be so much fresh water that even desert areas can become green. Vegetables will come from vertical farms near your home, growing on shelves in greenhouses with precise LED lighting. The meat you eat won't come from real animals, but will instead be lab-grown from animal cells. Currently, we use 25% of the world's land to raise livestock just to slaughter them for meat, but in the future, this will seem absurd. Those lands should be returned to nature and become wildlife havens. You will be using magical medications that slow aging and help control weight. You will only need to work 2 or 3 days a week, with plenty of holidays. Most tasks will be handled by AI. Flight times across half the globe will be reduced to under 2 hours due to supersonic planes. All of this should happen, but it won't happen automatically. Someone needs to build it. One simple example is high-speed rail. China has already built so much high-speed rail, and technology is no longer the issue. The U.S. doesn't lack resources or land, yet it still has no high-speed rail. California has been working on a high-speed rail line from Los Angeles to San Francisco, spending enormous amounts of money, but it is still far from completion. This won't create an abundant society. The U.S. has big problems. Klein and Thompson argue that the scarcity in America is artificially created. I often say that the strength of the U.S. comes not from what the government does, but from what the government doesn't do. The U.S. is likely the most market-oriented country in the world, and people always try to hand things over to the market as much as possible. The market gives the U.S. unique creativity, but it cannot solve all problems. If the market is zero-order reasoning, we need a few first-order corrections. For example, the market does not differentiate between clean energy and traditional energy. When you buy electricity on the market, you are buying 1 kilowatt-hour, and it doesn't matter whether it comes from coal or solar energy. The government must intervene to encourage more people to use clean energy while it is still a bit more expensive than traditional energy, by offering price subsidies or tax incentives. Moreover, the market only solves economic problems, but some things have social returns, like improving the environment. Another example is basic research, where there is no economic return in the short term. We can't expect private companies to sponsor everything. The ideal way is for the government to fund it first, then, once there is hope for profit, private companies can take over and industrialize it. In the past few decades, U.S. government investments in research have brought enormous returns. But Trump is currently stifling this mechanism. So, the government needs to take action. But now, both political parties in the U.S. are hindering the government from doing so. The Republican Party is directly anti-government, arguing that the government should do nothing except for defense. The Democratic Party weakens the government by advocating for distributing money to the public without proper funding. One party won't let the government act, and the other doesn't know how to act. This is the current state of the U.S. government. In China, the government is often revered for its proactive stance. You might find it hard to imagine that a U.S. president could publicly oppose the U.S. government. Reagan famously said, "Government is not the solution to our problem, government is the problem." A core philosophy of the Republican Party is, the government should tax less, refrain from interfering with the private sector, relax regulations, and let companies innovate, invent, and produce. This is the Republican version of supply-side economics. It sounds reasonable, but the reality is different. History has repeatedly shown that when companies receive tax cuts, they do not invest or expand production. What companies love to do with extra money is buy back stock, which pushes up stock prices and makes everyone happy in the market. The Democratic Party's philosophy is more demand-side. Simply put, it's about giving money to the people. Sometimes it's direct subsidies, other times it's some form of stimulus policies, believing that increasing demand will automatically create more supply. However, history has shown that such policies often just drive up prices. The most obvious example isn't consumer goods, but the areas where Democrats excessively subsidize. One example is healthcare. In the U.S., if you don't have insurance, even a basic doctor's visit could lead to a sky-high bill. This sounds like an out-of-control system, but why haven't Americans revolted? Because of government subsidies. Medicare fully covers elderly people, and low-income individuals can get insurance subsidies. These subsidies make healthcare affordable for most people, but they distort the market, leading to continuously rising medical prices. Why are rents so expensive? Because the government provides housing subsidies to low-income families. Why are university tuitions absurdly high? Because the government provides student loans. You can't deceive economics. Artificially increasing demand without increasing supply will inevitably make prices higher. Government money doesn't fall from the sky. It comes from taxpayers. Money spent on healthcare, housing subsidies, and student loans won't be used for infrastructure building. So, the U.S. government has very little money to invest in construction. The U.S. can't afford large-scale investment programs like China. The Republican Party advocates lower taxes, the Democratic Party advocates more government spending, and both parties ultimately lead to government dysfunction. So, should the U.S. learn from China? Maybe not necessarily. China's problem is that it collects taxes but doesn't distribute money, so the people can't consume. In fact, the bigger issue is that both parties' policies have distorted the market. In the 1950s, the median price of a house was 2.2 times the annual income, so most families could afford a house. By 2020, house prices had risen to 6 times the annual income, making housing a huge burden. Healthcare, university tuition, and childcare are following the same trend. Today, the American public's life situation is highly divided. On one hand, everyday consumer goods are very cheap. Buying a home appliance or even a car isn't a big deal. On the other hand, basic services like housing, healthcare, and education are ridiculously expensive, and many people are buried under heavy debt. This is a bit of an absurd story. In the 1960s, a typical family could go to college without loans, but they had a hard time buying a high-end television. Now it's the reverse. You can easily buy a TV, but it's extremely difficult to go to college without taking out loans. In today's America, if you're very poor, it's easier because the government provides aid, rental assistance, and subsidies for basic living. If you have asset-based income, you're likely doing well since stock prices and home prices are rising. But if you're in the middle class, neither poor nor rich, you have to bear the heavy burdens of housing, healthcare, and education. This is why the middle class in America is shrinking. But the middle class is the backbone of the country. The work is done by them. In the past, manufacturing was the best source of middle-class jobs, but now the number of manufacturing jobs has drastically decreased. Americans are strong consumers, but most of the goods are made overseas. These are some of the key reasons for the rise of MAGA sentiment among Trump supporters, fueling trade wars and calls to bring manufacturing back in response to these anxieties. Klein and Thompson advocate for a new direction beyond the two-party political system, called a liberalism that builds, which calls for the creation of an abundant society. They directly say that this book is mainly written for the Democratic Party, because Republicans wouldn't even bother reading their book. They clearly point out that Trump's large number of supporters can't be blamed solely on the Republican Party. It's actually due to the Democratic Party's failure to govern. Take California, for example, which has always been a stronghold for the Democratic Party, yet even in California, more and more people are supporting Trump. The reality is that people are tired of Democratic governance. They just enable problems without solving them. You can't even fix the homelessness issue on the streets of San Francisco, or address the looting and violence problems. The issues you care about, like LGBTQ+ rights and abortion rights, aren't the pressing concerns for most ordinary people. But conversely, the Republican Party hasn't really governed either. They are also just playing ideological games. Now, both parties have become platforms for identity politics. Supporting a party has become more about expressing who you are than about choosing a governance plan for the country. If you say you support the Republican Party, you're actually saying you advocate for a small government, oppose high taxes, and believe in freedom. If you say you support the Democratic Party, you're saying you strive for social fairness, want to help the vulnerable, and advocate for market regulation. These are all ideologies, not policies. Policies must be concrete and involve choosing degrees that require specific situations to be analyzed. Perhaps in this matter, both parties' stances can be applied to some degree. To truly solve the problem, you have to admit that some of the other side's views are also reasonable. But once you do that, you can't use your political stance to define who you are anymore. You will be abandoned by your own camp. This is the most foolish aspect of today's American politics. As Keith J. Hayward writes in Infantilized, How Our Culture Killed Adulthood, America today feels like a childish society. It focuses on expression rather than creation. It focuses on consumption rather than production. What specific solutions do the authors propose? We will discuss them in the next parts. That's it for today's content. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. If you feel there is value in this, please like, subscribe to this channel, and leave your thoughts or suggestions in the comments section. Let's grow together and read more good books.